As an E-rank hunter, Sung JinWoo is the lowest rank he can possibly be. He still has a slightly better build than the average person and can boast of a somewhat faster recovery rate, but he couldn't be called a proper hunter. Despite his inadequacy, he still risks his life and gets injured all the time. He doesn't do it because he enjoys it, but because he doesn't have much of a choice if he wants to continue paying for his mother's hospital bills. He's only just out of high school and has no particular skills he can monetize either, so being a hunter is his only option to keep him and his mother afloat. At a construction site in Seoul, he meets with a few others as they talk about the raid. They seem happy to see him, but only because of his nickname as the weakest hunter of all mankind. If someone so weak is being allowed on a raid, they can look forward to an easy time in the dungeon. As if their ridicule wasn't enough, they won't even spare a cup of coffee for him. Though at least someone seems to care about him. Joo-hee expresses concern over his injuries as he explains that he was the only one that got hurt in an E-rank dungeon, which is quite a feat. It wasn't necessarily his fault though. Everyone else he went to the dungeon with was high ranking, so they didn't think to bring a healer with them. Of course, someone known as the weakest hunter of all mankind was bound to get hurt. JinWoo blames it on his own weakness, and before they can talk more, it's time to head into the gate. Before their party enters, a man addresses them and asks if he can be the party leader. The man, Song, has the highest rank out of anyone else there, so nobody has any reason to protest. With that settled, they head into the gate portal while JinWoo follows at the back. Within the D-rank dungeon, Joo-hee heals JinWoo and asks him why he's so set on being a hunter when he just gets hurt all of the time. Meanwhile, their allies finish up the raid ahead of them. Joo-hee doesn't know about JinWoo's situation with his mother, and we see him even try to keep it hidden as he tells her he's just doing it as a hobby. Essence stones are awarded for defeating beasts, and even a C-rank magic beast rewards an essence stone worth over $8,000. Of course, JinWoo couldn't possibly fight a C-rank magic beast. Instead, he settles for risking his life for E-rank essence stones, which are worth much less. While they're going over the rewards, one of the party members finds another entrance over to the side, a phenomenon called a double dungeon. Since the gate doesn't close until they defeat the boss, they can either decide to head back and report to the association or push forward for the rewards. Dealing with the first part of the dungeon was easy enough, so how much worse could the second part be? A vote is held, and 8 people vote to continue while 8 vote to stop. JinWoo, being the last to vote, holds the party's fate in his hands. What other choice does he have though? His mother is bedridden, his little sister will be ready for college soon, and he has no savings to speak of. And so, with great risk comes great reward. Following his decision, they head farther into the dungeon and walk for around 40 minutes. JinWoo apologizes to Joo-hee for voting to go further even though he knows she voted to stop, and she berates him for being out of his mind. She already had to heal him once for an injury that could have killed him, so how could he be so reckless? Luckily she's a B-rank healer, or else he might already be dead. He really is sorry, but he still has his family to look after. In the end, she lets him off and tells him to buy a meal for her later to show his apology. The party then comes to the boss's lair, unique in that it has a door blocking the way. The place feels more dangerous than it should, but greed overtakes reason as they push forward. Within the strange room, blue torches light up a circular cathedral-like chamber, with stone statues all around them, each one holding something different. For some reason, they even feel like someone is watching them. No enemies are in sight though, and JinWoo stops to look at the biggest statue in the room, which depicts a man on a throne. It's a bit odd that they aren't being attacked, and party leader Song notices a divination circle on the floor before being called over to look at a statue of a hooded angel, its face concealed, holding a slab with a runic inscription. Song translates the slab as containing the commandments of the Kartanon Temple. Thou shalt worship God, thou shalt praise God. Joo-hee tugs on JinWoo's shirt as Song continues to read out the slab, and she points to the huge statue. She swears she saw its pupils moving to look at them, but JinWoo doesn't see anything out of the ordinary. But then, thou shalt prove thy faith. The room is eerily quiet as Song reads out the last commandment. Something is clearly off. Those who fail to obey these commandments shall not be spared. After he reads the last line, the doors to the room swing shut, and one of the other party members decides he's had enough. He walks up to the door and tries to pull it open, but he's instantly decapitated as one of the nearby stone statues moves with lightning speed and destroys his head with his stone mace. Then, the statue rests his mace on the ground and goes still again. A thought suddenly comes to JinWoo. Maybe Joo-hee was right about the massive statue's eyes moving. He turns and sees the statue looking down at them. The stone statues ring the circular room while JinWoo's party stands at the center. The massive statue rests ahead of them, still on its throne. It's supposed to be only a D-rank dungeon, so how could it be so full of colossal monsters that can kill them all instantly? If all of the stone statues can move, and even a smaller one is that powerful, just how strong could the massive one be? Of course, it isn't the first time JinWoo has been in a life or death situation, and it might be due to all of his experience as the weakest hunter where anything could kill him that he realizes the danger before anyone else. He yells at them to duck and forces Joo-hee to the ground with him just before a beam of destructive energy wipes out a portion of their party. Even party leader Song lost an arm from the beam. At first he thinks JinWoo might know something, but he was just lucky. Song has experienced a few B-rank dungeons before, and he believes that whatever the difficulty of the dungeon they're in is truly at, it's far above B-rank. He thinks the single large statue alone could possibly be S-rank. Thinking back to the commandments he read earlier, the god mentioned on the slab is probably the massive statue itself. Gates connect our world to other dimensions, and many inexplicable events have come about since they first appeared 10 years ago. The existence of hunters are a good example of one such event, and whatever strange dungeon they're trapped in at the moment is another. Party leader Song's stump of an arm continues to bleed, but none of the 3 healers are in any sort of state to fix him up. In fact, one was even completely obliterated by the energy beam. Joo-hee and the other healer might still be alive, but they're too frightened to do anything. Rather than trying to clear the dungeon, all they want now is to figure out how to escape with their lives. They'll be attacked the second they move, and even if they somehow make it to the doors, more of the statues will be waiting for them. One of the players, a promising prospect who recently signed with a guild, is confident in his speed and takes the chance to make an empowered dash at the doors. Much faster than before, the beam of energy erupts from the massive statue's eyes and incinerates the man's upper body, leaving his legs to fall and roll over the floor. The others turn their eyes away. The statues could kill all of them as if they were bugs, so why don't they? When he thinks about the statue that attacks those who approach the door and the massive statue that beams anyone who moves, JinWoo realizes that the room has certain rules that they need to follow to survive. Rules that have already been spoken out loud. His eyes lock on to the commandments of the Kartanan Temple. It might be crazy, but JinWoo slowly begins to stand as he explains the theory of the room having rules to party leader Song. The first commandment, "Thou shalt worship God," means it'll attack if you stand above a certain height. He stoops down in an imitation of worship as JinWoo explains his theory to the others, and then asks them all to get on the floor and bow their heads to the massive statue. When they do, the statue breaks out in a toothy, ear-to-ear grin. But that's not the end of it. The statue slowly rises from his throne to tower over them, and JinWoo shouts out the next commandment, "Thou shalt praise God." One of the surviving party members steps forward and says he's fairly confident in his singing because he used to be a part of a church choir. The man nervously begins to sing praise to God, and they wonder if it worked until the statue brings down a gargantuan stone foot and smears the man into a bloody pulp on the ground. The man was singing praises to the wrong god. Most of the others break down in panic or start to run, and the stone statue continues to indiscriminately stomp them into nothing but splatters over the stone chamber. JinWoo isn't sure what to do either, and he splits away from the group and drags Joo-hee behind, who's still too shocked to be of use. The party members who reach the walls of the circular chamber first are met with swift deaths at the hands of the statues still lining the walls. If they can't approach the statues or run, what are they supposed to do? JinWoo's mind races, and his eyes sweep over the statues until he notices one holding something different from the others, a trumpet. Since all of the others are holding weapons, are the ones holding instruments somehow different? He points it out to the others as they run and tells them to group up near the statues holding instruments. JinWoo arrives next to a statue holding a drum with Joo-hee still in his grasp, but the statue refuses to play. It looks like only one person can be under each statue holding an instrument, so he leaves her there and makes a mad dash for the next available one. It turns out that rather than an instrument, the statue he's running for is holding a shield. He just barely manages to escape getting eviscerated by it and crawls his way to a statue holding a hymn book, which begins to sing at his approach. The massive statue finally stops, and they're able to move freely again, though the doors remain closed. Joo-hee rushes over to him and notices he's missing the lower part of his right leg. She focuses on healing him as best she can, but even her mana eventually bottoms out and blood bursts from her nose. Meanwhile, the others take stock of their situation. The raid started with 17 members, but only 6 are left, and 2 of those 6 have serious injuries. It seems that they're placing most of the blame on Song as the party leader, and they watch in apprehension as the massive statue walks away from them to the center of the room. It reaches out its hand, summoning a circular stone altar from the ground. The third commandment, "Thou shalt prove thy faith," comes into play. It doesn't take much for the others to see the altar, hear the words, and put 2 and 2 together. Clearly, someone needs to die. The others turn on Song. JinWoo tries to butt in, but Song agrees that he has to take responsibility and is willing to walk to the altar willingly. How could they blame him when they decided to continue with the dungeon after a vote? When Song nears the altar, an orange flame lights up above the circular outline around the center of the room. Song looks fine, so JinWoo and the others each head into the circular outline, and more flames light up. They still have to find their way out since about a week has passed since the gate opened, and D-rank gates are usually pretty low on the priority list, even though a gate fully opens after 7 days and allows magic beasts to cross over onto Earth. Just how much chaos could one of the stone statues cause if they fill the dungeon and it gets loose? Finally, with all of them around the altar, another outer ring of flames, blue this time, lights up and slowly begins to tick down. The doors swing open, giving them an escape route, and all of the statues around the room trudge towards them. JinWoo notices that the statues stop approaching as long as they're being looked at, but one of the women in the circle with him loses her nerve and dashes toward the wide open doors. He's still convinced that the doors are a trap and they can all make it out. Unfortunately, any plan he has of trying to get them to work together falls apart when the others see the woman make it through the doors and see the doors close just a little behind her. One of the red flames goes out as the woman exits. JinWoo's mind races. It's clear the doors will completely shut when the last flame goes out, but there has to be another solution. He's in no condition to run after all. Since they were able to survive after following the other commandments, the last commandment, prove thy faith, must be the key. One of the other survivors apologizes and sprints through the door, leaving Song, JinWoo, Soo-hee, and one other, Mr. Kim. If one more person leaves, they'll have a blind spot and inevitably die from the statues. JinWoo tries to explain that the outer blue flames are slowly extinguishing like a timer. If they just stay until the end, they'll all be okay. Unfortunately, that's not enough to convince Mr. Kim, who thanks JinWoo for keeping them alive to that point and runs for the door. Given the option of trusting JinWoo or trusting his own 2 feet and surely seeing his family again, he trusts himself, even at the expense of the others. Another of the red flames goes out, and they no longer have enough people to completely keep the statues in sight and stop them. The doors are almost completely shut by now, and Song tells JinWoo to leave with Joo-hee. So long as one person is in the circle, it seems like the doors won't shut, but that also means one person has to get left behind or they'll all die. Though Joo-hee is recovered from her mental shock enough to move, she can't put any strength into her legs. It looks like she's used up too much mana to heal JinWoo and her body is in shock. It's not like JinWoo could take her instead either. He's still missing part of his leg. He's also the first to understand what must be done. He tells Song to take Joo-hee and run while he stays behind. All the while, the statues continue to slowly close in. Neither Song nor Joo-hee really want to leave him, but it's better than having all of them die. They say their goodbyes, and JinWoo gives Joo-hee the E-rank essence stone he collected earlier as he tells her to buy herself the meal that he promised. If he makes it out alive, he swears to go to her for the change. He watches as the 2 of them slowly walk out of the room. Though he knows he realistically can't do anything, he refuses to just lay down and die. One of the dead hunter's swords lies next to him, and he picks it up while scooting back against the altar. If he's going to die, he swears to take one of them down with him. Reality rears its ugly head and shatters his wishes. One of the statues pierces through his chest with a spear, breaking his feeble resistance apart. It rips the spear out, knocking JinWoo fully onto the altar, face up in the process. He's not suicidal. Of course, he doesn't want to die. He wishes with all his heart for just one more chance as the statue's sword descends on him with lightning speed. Then, suddenly energy swirls and the world freezes. A blue notification window floats in front of his eyes, telling him he's met the requirements to complete a secret quest. Courage of the Weak. A voice even accompanies the message and tells him he qualifies to become a player, while giving him no time to really make a decision. Whatever it is, it must be better than dying. He accepts, and a bright light flashes through the chamber. He wakes up suddenly, holding his chest and letting out heavy breaths. Was it all just a dream? It looks like he's in a hospital, so what happened? 2 men in suits enter the room and introduce themselves as the Hunter surveillance team. They reveal that he's been asleep for 3 days. They confirm that both Song and Joo-hee are safe, though Song's arm can't be healed and Joo-hee is in therapy from the shock she received. In total, only 6 of the original 17 players made it out of the double dungeon. Hunters know the risks they face, but complete party wipes are a rare occurrence. So rare in fact that the White Tiger Guild was sent to investigate the dungeon, where they found JinWoo lying unconscious on the altar, fully healed and with no statues in sight. Due to the strange circumstances, one of the agents tells JinWoo that they think he might have experienced a second awakening. Normally, a hunter's capability is decided when they first awaken, but there are cases where hunters experience a reawakening, or surpass their limits to advance to a higher tier. The agent places a mana meter between them and tells JinWoo to place his hand on top to measure his strength. Contrary to their suspicions, the meter gives JinWoo a score of 10. Even the weakest E-rank hunters usually have a score of 70. They don't even bother telling him his score before leaving as suddenly as they arrived. Maybe he should have told them about the strange system window floating in front of him, but he didn't know that they couldn't see it. His little sister arrives before he can mess with the window much and berates him for doing something so dangerous. He interrupts her and asks her if she can see his system window before her reaction is enough for him to tell that she really can't. Much to her confusion, he asks her what she would do if she had an unread message in a game. She would open her message box, of course. Not quite understanding, he says, "I have to open the message box?" And the system responds by doing exactly that. Inside, he sees a congratulations message for becoming a player, and something marked as a daily quest that tasks him with training to become a formidable combatant. His sister's visit ends, and she leaves while he investigates this odd new system some more. The system tells him that it's designed to help him develop, but that failing to comply will result in a penalty. Finally, he sees a message stating that he received a reward. All of the windows float in front of him at once, and he has no clue what any of them mean. His attention goes to the daily quest, and he opens it to find a list of exercise tasks, such as sit-ups and push-ups, as well as goals to complete for each. Does it really expect him to do all of that when he's in the hospital? He brushes it off for later and decides to go back to sleep. Time passes, and the countdown on the quest reaches 0 as midnight hits. It even warned him that failure to complete a quest would result in a penalty. Sure enough, the ground shakes, and he finds himself suddenly transported to a sandy desert just in time to see a monster. A poison-toothed giant desert centipede, as it rises from the sand and towers over him. The system informs him of his penalty quest and tells him to survive for 4 hours. The system being as it is, it shows no mercy, not even to a hospital patient. Over the course of the next 4 hours, sand centipedes chase him through the desert. True to its word though, the system pulls him out upon quest completion after exactly 4 hours. Just in the nick of time too, or else he would have been eaten. He's transported back to the hospital room as suddenly as he was transported out, with some sand even managing to come with him. A penalty quest is still a quest, so it gives him a reward for his efforts. 4 days pass, and JinWoo doesn't make the same mistake again. Being in the hospital is no excuse for not completing his daily quest. He diligently completes the exercise tasks every day. The past few days have been enough for him to realize that he's the only one who can see the system, and that the reward he receives from the quests is his choice of instantly recovering, obtaining ability points to spend on his stats, or getting a random item box. Stats, skills, items, inventory, random boxes. It's like he's playing a computer game of some sort. On top of all that, he also needs to figure out what the dungeon key he received from the random loot boxes really does. Thankfully, the key's description window tells him exactly where it can be used, at a train station, to open an instance dungeon. He goes to the station and wonders whether the system he has is the result of having reawakened, or if it's just part of the process. Confident in his ability to run away, JinWoo uses the key and enters the dungeon, only to find that it works like a red gate, so he can't escape until it's cleared. He was a struggling E rank not long ago, and now he's supposed to clear a dungeon himself? As unbelievable as it might be, he has no other choice. Step by step, he descends into the darkness of the railway station. A foul stench reaches his nose before long, and a beast-type monster soon follows. A steel-fanged wolf that he manages to dodge. The monster charges at him again, and JinWoo discovers that his legs won't move how he wants. His lingering trauma holds him back, but he manages to snap himself out of it and just barely avoid the monster's attack. He doesn't have a healer or any other way to heal, so he can't afford to get hurt. While he's running from the monster, he realizes his body feels lighter than usual, and he takes the chance to punch the steel-fanged wolf in the jaw, sending it flying. The effects of having raised his stats through the ability points awarded by the system are evident, but he still isn't stronger than the wolf. Not yet anyway. Attacks begin to graze him. He can't keep dodging forever. Since he can't defeat it barehanded, he tries to think of anything he might be able to use to kill the wolf. But actually, there is something. Mr. Kim's sword has been resting in his inventory since the incident in the double dungeon. He's able to defeat the monster in a single stroke with the sword, and receives a level in the process. That was easy enough. Then again, Mr. Kim originally paid $30,000 for the sword for a reason. 2 more wolves approach him from the darkness. After he kills another of them, he thinks back to the statues that almost killed him, and realizes how weak the wolves are compared to those things. The surviving wolf slinks away and vanishes into the darkness. It's the first time he's gained a level with the new system, and he sees that he gained 1 point in each of his 5 stats for doing so. Since quests only give 3 unallocated points compared to the 5 allocated points he gets from leveling, he concludes it's more efficient to kill monsters for experience. Just the stat points would be good enough, but there are also less tangible benefits from repeated combat, such as confidence and fighting skills. It's nice that the system quantifies things like strength, ability, sense, health, and intelligence, but that doesn't do much for him since he doesn't have a baseline for the numbers. Just how much smarter is 11 intelligence compared to 9, for example? He definitely feels an improvement from strength going up to 20, which is his highest stat. But could it be that stats become more effective as they rise in a sort of exponential growth? In the end, all that matters is that he knows he becomes stronger each time he levels up. When he investigates the monster corpses, he finds items instead of essence stones. In this case, he gets their steel fangs that he can sell in the shop or store in his inventory. The shop interface is another thing that came with the system. He's able to sell the steel fang for 20 gold in the shop, but he still isn't at a high enough level to buy anything. He also doesn't know what 20 gold is really worth, but since the dungeon is probably somewhere around E rank, he doesn't think it'll be all that much. JinWoo doesn't believe he can kill the boss monster yet. Instead, he can kill more monsters to get stronger first. And there are plenty of monsters to kill. The wolf that retreated earlier returns with his entire pack, and they swarm JinWoo. He kills one after the other, unafraid and determined to put everything on the line for the sake of becoming stronger and being able to protect the people he cares about. His level rapidly rises, and still more monsters charge at him. But still, even exhausted and injured from countless small scrapes and grazes, a fire burns in his heart. Before the next pack of wolves attacks, he's awarded with the Wolf Assassin title. Finally, after countless monsters, JinWoo stands alone with their corpses littering the floor around him. Even the most expensive weapons wear out, and his sword is now a dull, cracked shell of its former self. It served its purpose though, and his new Wolf Assassin title makes him even stronger against the beasts, by increasing all of his abilities by 40% when fighting beast-type monsters. He loots 34 wolf fangs, 2 worn daggers, a traveler's cloak, and a teleportation stone from their bodies. The stone can be used to leave the dungeon, but when would he get the chance to reap such rewards again? Thinking of whatever entity is behind the system and how it's dictating his actions so much puts a bad taste in his mouth. But does he have much of a choice? He goes further into the dungeon. The more he kills, the easier killing becomes. Level after level passes by and more types of monsters start appearing. It doesn't matter though, because one dies just as easily as the other. Unlike a normal dungeon, JinWoo has realized by now that the monsters endlessly respawn. This gives him an infinite farm for levels until he finds that the wolves have white labels, meaning they're relatively weak compared to him. An orange color would mean they're roughly on the same level, and red means they're significantly stronger. His sword can't take much more, and leveling through killing white labeled monsters would just be inefficient. Behind it all, he senses the pure strength of the dungeon boss in the depths. He descends toward it, and it eventually ambushes him and breaks his sword in one go. Despite all of the levels he gained, the boss, King of the Swamp, Blue Venom-Fanged Kasaka, still carries an orange label. JinWoo holds his sword in a reverse grip. At least orange means that it's near his level. The snake-like boss towers above him, and JinWoo can tell at a glance that he won't be able to pierce or punch through its scales. He'll have to break down its defenses to kill it, but how is he supposed to get through such thick scales? Will he never be able to escape from his past as the weakest hunter, unable to do anything? Overwhelming power is the answer to everything in this world of hunters. People will do anything when faced with such power, and JinWoo wants that power for himself. The power to dictate his own life. With everything poured into his strength stat, JinWoo narrowly avoids the boss and firmly wraps his arms around as much of his neck as he can. His sword is useless, so this is his only shot. He uses every fiber of energy in his body to put pressure on the snake's neck, and it flails as its scales begin to crack. While his doctors back at the hospital talk about just how monstrous hunters are, JinWoo succeeds in defeating the boss and gains multiple levels, as well as the Kasaka's Venom Gland and the Kasaka's Venom Fang Dagger. His clothes are in tatters, his new sword is broken, and he's hurt and sore all over. But he really cleared the dungeon by himself and gained the dagger, which is far better than his old sword in the process. While the sword had an attack of plus 10, the dagger has an attack of plus 25 and includes bleed and paralyze features on top of that. The Venom Gland is a bit trickier though. If he eats it, it'll permanently decrease the physical damage he takes by 20% while also lowering his strength by 35 points. He decides to store the gland for the moment, and the dungeon fades away around him as he returns to the real world. Strangely, the station is empty. A soldier greets him and warns him of a gate break as he exits the station. The hunters have taken care of all but the boss monster so far, which JinWoo can sense in the distance as it fights. Hunters fight the monster while people crowd around and take pictures, and the army tries to keep them back. JinWoo arrives and watches them fight. All of the hunters appear to be low ranked and have terrible coordination. The only hunter higher than E rank is a tank type hunter who is unable to land a decisive blow. Next, JinWoo looks to the healers and sees a familiar face. Juhee freezes up as she watches the monster fight the other hunters, and one of them has to snap her out of it to get healing. She clearly isn't over the trauma of the double dungeon. The boss is around D rank and a step weaker than the snake boss he fought earlier. The tricky part is going to be breaking through its rock-like exterior. He needs to land a single heavy blow to crack the exterior and expose it to further attacks. Holding a normal dagger in his hand, he tenses his muscles and launches the dagger at the boss with all of his strength. The mundane dagger does what none of the other hunters could do and shatters the boss's stone-like exterior. As the highest ranking hunter there, the tank recognizes that they received outside help. He was the only one to notice that the boss's head suddenly exploded from just a normal dagger, which was launched with such power that it was nearly invisible. The dagger rests in a pile of rubble nearby, and one of the soldiers points JinWoo out to the tank hunter as he walks away. The hunter thinks JinWoo might have been a high-ranking hunter, but Juhee seems to recognize him. Thanks to all the stats and experience he gained so far, he's now at level 18. Days pass and JinWoo continues his daily training, even shocking a nurse when she walks in and sees how built his body has become. The nurse confirms he'll be leaving that day and blushes as she asks for his number. He misunderstands that she needs it to send him his exam results later and gives it to her without a second thought. After being discharged and returning home to live with his sister again, she notices he's been working out as well after he tells her to be cautious of cars on her way to school. His being more buff is one thing, but how could exercise make him taller as well? He hands her an umbrella and nudges her out the door. Most of his quests have been completed for the day. He just needs to do his 10-kilometer run a bit later. It's true that he's been working out, so some sort of gain is expected, but his body is so different that something else has to be at play. Maybe his stats are having an effect on his body as well. He has been pouring stats into strength so far. Other stats are good as well and can complement strength though. All of the strength in the world means nothing if he can't land an attack, so he decides to start investing more in agility. The effects of higher health and senses on fighting ability are obvious, but will he really need intelligence? A call from the landlord arrives. Luckily, he has a really understanding landlord who offers to give him more time to pay. He's different now though, and he promises to pay. If he keeps leveling up, he'll be able to earn more money in no time. Since his official ranking is E rank, he's only been allowed into the least profitable, easiest gates, and hasn't had experience beyond a C rank gate. He considers retaking the exam and boosting his ranking, but that would reveal his status as a reawakener. On one hand, he would get a lot of publicity that he could monetize, but on the other, he'd receive a lot of unwanted attention. JinWoo concludes that he can't expose himself until he's certain he's reawakened. Back to his original problem, he needs to find a way to earn money and finds a job posting for a C rank gate. When he meets the party near the gate, he confirms the contract is for $20,000, but he won't get any share of the essence stones. JinWoo looks over the party and judges that at least 5 are C rank, while 4 are D rank or lower. He'll be joining what's called a strike squad, a party formed of 5 core C rankers and 5 people recruited just to fill the quota of a minimum of 10 members. Yoo Jin-ho, a D ranker, greets him. Jin-ho is also just filling a spot, but he's a bit odd in that he's decked out in extremely fancy and expensive equipment. Jinwoo's only task is to carry their bags and keep up with them. Not having a healer is making him a bit anxious, but he decides to follow them to the gate. Jin-ho keeps trying to chat with him. Eventually, JinWoo asks him if he's always so chatty. Jin-ho's reaction and his statement that he's just a hunter for fun are enough to pretty much confirm that he's the son of some sort of business tycoon or corporate CEO. The gate looms above them, so massive that a few wonder if it's really C rank, but it's more about the mana waves a gate emits than the size of the gate. Anything above a C rank is usually handled by a major guild after all, and the Hunter Association carefully ranks each gate. Everyone at least seems to be properly geared, which in itself is a big difference compared to the D and E rank groups he's used to clearing dungeons with. The dungeon that greets them within the gate is strangely dark and devoid of monsters. Since the glowing stones usually present within dungeons are absent and an intelligent monster would have trouble living in such darkness, JinWoo figures out that they'll be facing insect-type monsters just as a distant rumbling shakes their tunnel. He tells the others as much and they group together. The swarm of insects arrives from above, and their battle begins. Luckily, the party seems fairly well coordinated, and they massacre the insects without trouble. JinWoo still tries to keep his power hidden and only strikes out to kill one insect that tries to ambush him. Strangely though, JinWoo noticed the party was a bit too into the fight. What's even more worrying is that the party leader praises his instincts afterwards and says he hopes JinWoo's instincts won't pick up on anything unnecessary. What is that supposed to mean? Among the corpses of the insects, they find a few that seem to have been ripped apart by something else before them. To the party leader, it smells like money. By now, JinWoo is certain that something is strange with the party leader and his core group. An ominous feeling overtakes him. Once again, Jin-ho's expensive equipment stands out to him, and he tells him to be careful. They spend most of their time in the maze-like dungeon walking, while JinWoo carries the bags and stays out of fights. It was supposed to be an easy job. The phrase "beware of lizards" echoes through JinWoo's mind. One thing he knows from all of his experience is that if he has a bad feeling about something, he's never wrong. They continue to walk, only coming across the corpses of more dead insects in their path until they encounter a tunnel crisscrossed with webs. That's not enough to dissuade them, and they continue on to find massive mana crystals jutting from the walls. The crystals have less mana than essence stones, but there are just so many that even a rough calculation is enough to tell that they'll have over $10 million worth in front of them. Even after dividing it 9 ways, they'd still leave with over $1 million each. While everyone else is elated, Jinho looks over JinWoo's contract and sees that it doesn't state how goods other than essence stones will be distributed. Confused, Jinho confronts the rest. Why did they mention splitting it 9 ways instead of 10? The party leader pauses for a moment before giving a forced smile, saying it was his mistake. Of course they'll split it 10 ways. Before that though, they need to take care of the boss monster, a giant spider that rests above them in its web. Once they defeat the boss, the dungeon will close, so they need to mine and transport all of the crystals before that. Luckily, the spider seems to be asleep. The party leader asks his team if they brought their mining equipment, but of course they didn't. He turns to JinWoo and Jinho and asks them to stay and stand guard while the rest of them go back for the equipment. Jinho protests at first. Why do they have to stay? The party leader seems to have already thought this out and tells them just to trust him as the more experienced hunter. The spider hasn't woken up despite their fairly loud conversation, so it should be fine, right? JinWoo falls into thought. According to the rules, at least 10 people are needed to enter a C-rank gate. That being the case, there are 8 members of the strike squad who seem to all know the party leader. If they've been working that way for a long time, they must have been in and out of a lot of C-rank gates. If that's true, how was the party able to enter C-rank gates without issue before? He didn't need 2 random people. His suspicions are confirmed when the party leader collapses the entrance to the boss's lair with an explosion. What happens inside dungeons isn't made public, so committing crimes within them is fairly easy. It's not like there are security guards or cameras. Evil people exist everywhere, so it only makes sense that there would be evil hunters as well. Lizards who leave the weak behind and steal from the strong to look out for their own interests. JinWoo realized it was a trap before, but they would have just been killed outright if they made the wrong move. It wouldn't be that hard for him to get out if he wanted to, but the spider, a C-rank dungeon boss, is the real problem. The explosion woke it up. Elsewhere, the party leader exits the dungeon with the others. His plan is to just wait for a bit while the boss kills JinWoo and Jinho, going back in after the spider falls asleep again and they can gather the crystals. If they can't take the mana crystals with them, the party leader wants to at least take Jinho's expensive equipment for himself. The party leader doesn't think that even he would be able to kill the boss himself, so JinWoo and Jinho's deaths are all but assured. Within the boss room, JinWoo looks at the spider towering over them and finds it lacking compared to the statues. He steps in front of Jinho and summons his dagger. Jinho, of course, doesn't think he stands a chance. Only a B-rank hunter or higher would be able to solo a C-rank boss. He already killed the venom-fanged Kasaka before, which was probably stronger than a D-rank boss. The spider in front of him is much stronger than the Kasaka was, but he still doesn't feel intimidated. He's truly starting to believe in himself. JinWoo rushes forward and attacks with his dagger, which pierces the spider's carapace and allows him to injure it. A hunter through and through now, JinWoo fights the boss without fear. Even with his special dagger, injuring the giant spider couldn't be called easy. It has 8 legs and there's nowhere for JinWoo to hide, so he has to be cautious. Jinho just watches in shock. Isn't JinWoo supposed to be an E-rank hunter? That's definitely not the case, and he suspects JinWoo is actually a false ranker, who can control his magic abilities and artificially lower his rank during evaluation. The problem is that many false rankers are psychopaths who commit murder for fun. Minutes pass, and JinWoo is slowly losing energy. He hasn't landed any decisive blows on the boss, so he needs to end it as soon as possible. He decides to utilize the dagger's paralyze and bleed effects just as the spider uses its trump card, and it spits acid at him. Luckily, he manages to avoid it. JinWoo just needs to be even faster to close the distance. His only active skill, speed, finally comes into play, and he rushes forward, dodging the spider's flurry of attacks and striking it in the eyes with the dagger. He pushes himself to go faster and faster, and his energy rapidly depletes until the spider finally lands a hit and knocks him into the ground. The boss goes for the killing blow, but JinWoo has a trump card of his own. He hasn't accepted the reward for his daily quest yet, and he chooses this moment to take the status recovery option, instantly healing himself and being re-energized. With his newfound energy, he latches himself onto the spider's head and plunges his dagger into its eyes again and again, paralyzing it repeatedly until it dies. There's no doubt in Jinho's mind that JinWoo is a false ranker, so he picks up the heavy bags and tries to appeal to him, calling JinWoo sir and starting to mine the crystals. JinWoo brushes it off as gratitude for saving his life as he drinks water and rests for a moment. But it truly is only a moment. An explosion clears the entrance to the boss's lair, and figures walk through the smoke. The party leader enters with the rest of his strike squad. They're confused when they see that the boss is dead and the two are still alive. He quickly reassesses the two of them and assumes that Jinho soloed the boss while JinWoo was useless. Wanting to get into his good graces now, the party leader reveals that he found out that Jinho is the son of Yujin Construction's chairman. Calling the party leader a lizard would be an insult to lizards. He promises to give Jinho a chance if he kills JinWoo. Little do they know that JinWoo was the one to solo the boss. Knowing what he does, Jinho sides with the one who everyone else believes to be the weakest hunter. JinWoo's system suddenly goes crazy as the party leader and his group approach with their weapons drawn. System messages overlap with each other as he's given a quest to kill the hunters intending to harm him. One of the party leader's allies sends JinWoo flying into a wall with a magical attack, and they assume him to be dead. JinWoo, lying in the debris, remembers something he'd somehow forgotten. The world of hunters is governed by the principle of survival of the fittest. The system is trying to force him to commit murder, proving that it needs him to be strong. You can tell that it simply wants him to be powerful. Since the system is using him for a goal that he still can't see, he decides to truly use the system. They're still not taking him seriously, and one of the aggressors approaches him and leans in to talk down at him. Before he knows it, the man's head is rolling on the ground as JinWoo grips his dagger. How could a lowly E-rank hunter kill a D-rank so easily? JinWoo counts out the first kill. 1. He's now crossed a certain line by killing a fellow human being. Instead of feeling remorseful, his anger and will to survive surge. A dark aura flows around him, and when the mage tries to hit him with a spell again, he dodges and slices the man to pieces in the blink of an eye. The others charge in to attack, but JinWoo becomes a blur as he counters every strike with perfect efficiency and rips them apart. Finally, only the party leader is left standing. The man buffs himself and charges forward, confident in his strength as a C-rank hunter. JinWoo proves to not only be faster, but stronger as well, and he grabs the party leader's head to slam him into the ground. The man starts to beg for his life. Does he really expect mercy after trying to kill JinWoo 3 times? He tries to warn JinWoo about his younger brother, but JinWoo isn't fazed in the slightest. What happens in the dungeons stays in the dungeons. The party leader's head goes rolling, and JinWoo has Jinho follow him to the exit. The dungeon should be closing any moment now. He gets a message for completing the quest and the bloodlust skill as a reward. Elsewhere, in Washington, USA, someone who looks a lot like the now deceased party leader wakes up in bed and feels teary-eyed, though he doesn't know why. We hope you enjoyed the story so far. Be sure to check out Solo Leveling to find out how JinWoo progresses from the world's weakest hunter to becoming the strongest.